Hello guys, my name's Megan Epps and I'm going to be showing you guys how I mix my counterculture artist resin. I already went ahead and measured my part A and part B. I pour my resin into the medical cups. I labeled my part A so I know which one it is. I do not do anything prior to measuring them out. I do not warm my epoxy. I keep my room about between 72 to 75 degrees, and I have just found that I come with less bubbles when I don't warm my epoxy. So I have skipped that step in my process and I don't do that anymore. So I literally just measure my part A and my part B out. I have 30 milliliters each here. And then I have a separate cup where I pour each of them into. I always start with my part B first because part B is much thinner than part A. And if you were to put part A first, the thinner part B would just sit on top of the thicker part A. So by putting part B first and then part A, you're allowing your part A to sink to the bottom, giving you a better mix. And it's important to have your epoxy mixed very thoroughly. You want to make sure it's mixed up all the way, because if you don't mix your epoxy and make sure it's mixed up good where that part A and part B is totally mixed up together, it can really lead in a result of your epoxy being tacky, your project not finishing right, just a load of problems. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you're measuring out the 1-to-1 ratio. And you see here I'm scraping my cups. I'm a big scraper. I try to get every little bit out of the cup so that I am getting a good 1-to-1 ratio. So we have our part B. And now we're going to add our part A. Part A is a lot thicker. Now you see that I'm using a popsicle stick to scrape my cups. This is the only time when I'm mixing my resin that I use a popsicle stick. Popsicle stick is wood and there is air inside of wood. So if you use your popsicle stick to stir your epoxy, you're most likely going to have more bubbles than you would if you were to use a silicone stirring tool or a metal stirring tool. I have one of the metal ones and I will show that to you in just a second. I use the side of my medicine cup to scrape off the stuff on the popsicle stick. I don't scrape it on this side because I don't want to risk losing the epoxy dripping down the side of the cup. So I'm trying to get as much of my resin off of this popsicle stick and out of this cup as possible. Alright, so we're almost done. I'm just going to give this a final scrape and then we're going to jump right into the mixing part of this. Now, it's important to me, I always have a little timer on my side next to me. This helps me keep track of the amount of time that I'm stirring for. I always set my timer. It's a recommended time to stir your epoxy is about 3 minutes. I always go to about 4 just to ensure that I'm getting a really good mixture. Excuse me. Alright, so now we're going to mix our epoxy. When I first started out, it was important that I figured out the way that worked best for me. I watched lots of tutorials and I always saw people stirring their epoxy different ways. So I started trying the different ways out and I figured out the way that works best for me. So I always recommend to anybody that watches my tutorials to really find what works best for you. Now the way that I stir my epoxy is I like to go in a more of a back and forth motion rather than going in a circle. I feel like when I go in a circle, it causes more bubbles rather than doing more of a zigzag motion. Now I'll go pull it up, go like this, where I'm going boom, 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 rather than back and kind of starting at this end and pulling it up, kind of folding it. I'll do that. And then I'll also do a figure 8 where I'm kind of just, you know, doing an 8 motion with my metal tool stir stick here. Alright, so I just start off by going back and forth, trying to get that epoxy mixed up as get that thick A into the B. Once you start mixing your epoxy, you will be able to tell the more that you mix that it's getting mixed up better and better, because it won't be as thick. That's when you know that you're getting close to being done. Also, it will clear up. You won't see that foggy, cloudiness that's in the cup right now that you're seeing. You'll see more of a clearness to it. So we're just gonna go back and forth. I also feel like by doing this motion that it helps pop any bubbles that I may have. Now I will do a circle every once in a while, and that's just to scrape the sides of my cup, just to make sure that I'm scraping the sides, getting all that epoxy mixed in, and then I'll go right back to the zigzag motion. This way may take longer, but this is the way that I feel like I result in the least amount of bubbles. I'm just gonna tip this over so I can see a little bit in here. I think that one of the keys to mixing epoxy is really just having patience with it. And you can see right now that there's hardly any bubbles in there. And any bubbles that I do get, I always will eliminate them and pop them with my torch. Okay guys, and that is it. So now I have almost no bubbles in my epoxy. The little bit that I do have in there, I will be able to get rid of with my torch. See them? But not a lot. Not a lot at all. And there is our epoxy, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks.